Hi, everybody. We're going to continue where we left off today. Start with Parak A. So we learn these psukim in the Parak, which talk about Yirmiyahu's challenges with what he's seeing in the streets. He's seeing people that aren't changing their ways. So we'll look at the Radak here on the pasuk, on pasuk Aleph, which you have on the page over here that I handed out in class. So to the bottom of the page. And the Radak, I'm just going to read it off the page here on the website. The Radak begins by quoting a pasuk in Tehillim, which is from an important parak of Tehillim. And he starts like this: Chipsu bikshu, v'hinei amar David b'sever Tehillim. So Chipsu bikshu is how Yirmiyahu starts off his words of the parak. Parak Hey, go out and look in the street, see what's going on. And the Radak here quotes from the Sefer of Tehillim, which is David HaMelech's Sefer, Psalms. And in the Tehillim, he writes the following pasuk. I'm going to pull it up here in the Chabad version, which has a nice English translation. It's Parak Ayin Tet, 79, pasuk Bet. Natnuet nivlad avadecha machal of hashemayim, besar chasidech lechai to'aretz. They have given the corpses of your servants as food to the birds of the heaven, the flesh of your pious ones to the beasts of the earth. So this is the parak in Tehillim where David actually has a nevuah about the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. Mizmor la'asaf, you can read it here in the first pasuk. Nations have come into your heritage, they've defiled your holy temple, they've made Jerusalem into heaps. So this is David HaMelech writing hundreds of years before the actual destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, describing some of the scenes of the Churban Habayit. Now the Radak here, and Yirmiyahu in our parak, he quotes this pasuk, and he's very bothered because David HaMelech is clearly indicating to us that there were Chasidim, there were tzaddikim, there were Chasidim who were in the streets of Yerushalayim. So how could Yirmiyahu in our parak say, I couldn't find anyone, I couldn't find any righteous people, I couldn't find any Chasidim, he's so bothered, he's so nervous, everything is bad, there's no good people around, I went to the Gedolim, like in pasuk K, and no one's paying attention, no one's listening. So he writes, Hine, second line, Ki ayu b'Yerushalayim Chasidim. We see there were Chasidim, V'avdei ha'el, and religious people. Ve'echamar Yirmiyahu, how could Yirmiyahu say, Im yesh oseh mishpat mevakesh emunah ve'aslachla? How could Yirmiyahu say, I'm looking for someone who lives righteously, who acts their life with justice. Person, they're all around. There's Chasidim, there's Tzadikim. We clearly see from David HaMelech's words that these people existed. So how could Yirmiyahu indicate or hint to the fact that these people didn't exist? So Radak brings two answers. One from his father, Perish Adoni Avi Zal, Zichron Levracha, Yirmiyahu amar bechutzot Yerushalayim, v'amar birchovoteha, ki hachasidim shehi b'Yerushalayim yimirchabim bebatehem, v'lo yicholim litraot berchavot uvechutzot mipnei rashaim. A fascinating comment given to us by the father of the Radak. He says that Yirmiyahu went to the chutzot of Yerushalayim, the outskirts of Jerusalem, perhaps not necessarily in the biblical in the city of the Beit HaMikdash, the Ir David, but beyond the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, the old ancient city of Jerusalem, the Ir David, and on the streets of Jerusalem. In other words, there were places where the Hasidim were, where Yirmiyahu didn't go to find them. He went on the streets, but he didn't go into hiding. Says the father of the Radak, they were mitchabim bebatim, they were hiding in their homes, they were hiding in their houses. So there were Chasidim. The way David HaMelech tells us, there were Chasidim there, they existed, but they had gone into hiding. Why did they go into hiding? Mipnei harishayim. There were a lot of bad people out in the streets. There were a lot of bad gangsters, bad, evil people that were hanging out. And the Chasidim, the Tzadikim, didn't want to be found by them, didn't want to be caught by them. So yes, it's true, Yirmiyahu went out to the streets, he was looking for, is there anybody who's hearing my message? Is there anybody who's listening? Is there anybody who's willing to change? The answer is there were people, but Yirmiyahu didn't find them because they were in hiding. That's one approach to this point. The second approach of Chazal, and Radak here is quoting from, I think it's a Medrash, and they write, Kevan shenergu al yedei oivim, afal pisha yirushaim v'chayvei mita, nitkaper lahem b'mitatan v'karei lahu avadecha v'chasidecha. Interesting comment from Chazal. We'll read it word by word here. Since they were killed, meaning the Hasidim, the righteous people that David HaMelech was speaking about, they were killed by the enemies. Doesn't identify who the enemies are in this case. Even though they really weren't Hasidim, so David HaMelech is calling them Hasidim, they were actually Rishaim and Chayvei Mita. They were obligated to die. They had done terrible things, terrible sins. Nitkaper lahem b'mitatan. Their deaths were a kapara of sorts, an atonement of sorts for the sins that they committed in their lives, and by their sins being atoned, they're now being called avadecha v'chasidecha. They're being called my servants and my chasidim. So interesting. Two approaches to this question. How could David HaMelech say that there were chasidim if Yirmiyahu's walking around at the time of Churban, just before, on the eve of the Churban, and he's not finding any chasidim? Clearly, they were there. So one approach is that there were chasidim, the father, the Radak, there were chasidim, they just had gone into hiding. The second approach of Chazal is that there were no chasidim. They were actually all bad people, all evil people. Yet what happened was, these evil people, because they died, when they died, their kapara, their death, was atoned, and all of their sins in their life were atoned through their death. This is a concept in Chazal, that the death of a person has a certain atonement, and that death kind of purges their sins that they did in their lives, and they can once again be called avadecha v'chasidecha. So the Chazal's interpretation is, we're not reading David HaMelech's words as literal. So Yirmiyahu really never found any chasidim in the streets. Okay, so that's what's going on here in the storyline. Yirmiyahu is going out in the streets. He's not finding anybody who's really paying attention to him. There's a problem, though, that there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between Yirmiyahu and Yoshiyahu, the king. Yoshiyahu is this very hopeful, very positive kind of personality. He thinks that everything's going great. He thinks everything is fine and dandy. He's got these grandiose plans to change society and purify the cities. And he's under the impression that he's attained a point in history where we've actually been able to avoid the Churban. This is what Yoshiyahu feels. We have indications of this from different prakim in Tanakh, as I'm going to show you in a moment. And Yoshiyahu basically wasn't really on the same page as Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu was a little bit more of a pessimist, as we're starting to see. And a lot of people weren't really interested in what he wanted to say. One of the theories, we looked at the passage a few days ago where Yoshiyahu goes to Huldah, the prophet. One of the theories of why he went to Huldah is because he wasn't interested in Yirmiyahu's message and Yirmiyahu's approach, which was a lot more pessimistic, a lot more related to Churban and destruction. So I put here on the second side of the page that I gave out in class a midrash, which we need some background information to actually appreciate the midrash, and it's going to move us into the end of the life of Yoshiyahu. So we're going to first look at, I'm going to post this as well, a map. And this is the map of ancient Near East. What's going on? You see Israel here in the middle of the map. Small little place over here. Egypt to the south. Syria. And Assyria, Ashur, Madai, and Bavel. Okay, these are all the empires that are... Bavel's starting to gain strength. Ashur is the world power at this point in the story. As we know, the exile of the 10 tribes with Sancherib that you learned about. So basically what's going on here is a number of important events that see the rising up of Bavel and the fall of Ashur. This is described in the book of Nahum, who's one of the minor prophets. I think I have it here somewhere. Where is Nahum? Let's go find him. Nahum, one of the minor prophets, in his very small book, only 3 chapters. In the second chapter, here it is. I brought it with the English. In the second chapter, he basically has a prophecy about the downfall of Ashur, the great Assyrian empire. And in here, he talks about the city of Nineveh, which we all know from the book of Yonah. Nineveh was the capital of Ashur. And Nineveh, the city falls, and the Babylonian Empire is basically beginning to take hold and beginning to become stronger and stronger. And 614 BCE, these are just some dates that are just interesting for this time. Madai, okay, captures the city of Ashur and joins forces with Bavel. So this is Madai, Madai over here. These are major, major, major centers. Nineveh, Ashur. You see these dots here. Damascus. Okay, so they capture this city. This is a major center of Ashur, and then of course Nineveh, which I think is the capital. Nineveh. 2 years later, Nineveh falls to Madai and Bavel. So Bavel starts to slowly take over this whole region, and they're starting to move their way south towards Israel and Egypt. Now, Egypt at this point is basically an ally with Israel, and Egypt is scared that Bavel is going to push southward towards Egypt. So that's just a little bit of a background. I'm going to post this. You'll see this map. Anyway, what happens is Yoshiyahu doesn't like invading armies, even if they're peaceful. See, just look at the map one more time. The description we're going to look at in Malachim and Divrei Hayamim in a moment basically describes Paro Necho, is the name of the pharaoh at the time. He's interested in just passing through the land of Israel so he can go and fight the Babylonians up here in the north, in this area. Babylonians are pushing south, and Paro Necho is pushing north. And in order to get to that place to fight the Babylonians, he has to push through the land of Israel. So Yoshiyahu doesn't like this. He doesn't like this invading army. And basically, we have the following episode here described in two different places. One in Malachim Bet, Parachav Gimel, which is really, really, really almost at the end of the Malachim Bet, the end of the history of the first Beit HaMikdash. And you have a short description here in Pasuk Chavter and Pasuk Lamed, B'yamav, in the days of Yoshiyahu, Allah Paro Necho Melech Mitzrayim. Paro Necho became the new pharaoh of Egypt, Al Melech Ashur, Al Nahar Prat, and he basically went up to fight against the invading armies. Vayelech HaMelech Yoshiyahu likrato, vayimiteu Megiddo kiroto. Now basically Yoshiyahu meets him in a place called Megiddo. I don't remember if I have it on the map here. I tried to, so where that arrow points, the big orange arrow, that's Megiddo. I found it on Google Maps, and that's basically, it's not far from Yerushalayim, as you can see. So Yoshiyahu basically stands in the way of Paro. Paro is coming with his invading army, and Yoshiyahu stands there to stop him and says, I'm not letting you pass through the land of Israel. So Paro Necho kills Yoshiyahu. This is how Yoshiyahu dies. A very tragic death. Vayirkiveu avadav mate Megiddo, and they bring him to Yerushalayim. Yoshiyahu, that is. They bring him to Yerushalayim. They bury him there. Bikvurato vayikacha ma'aretz et Yehoachaz ben Yoshiyahu, the next king, Yehoachaz, we're going to learn about next week. Vayimshechu oto vayamlichu oto tachat aviv. And he is crowned king under his father, in place of his father. It's a tragic death. He dies at the hand of Paro Necho. There's another description here in Divrei Hayamim Bet. The psukim are Perak Lamed Hey, Pasuk Chaf through Chaf Daled. Acharei kol zot, asher hechin Yoshiyahu et habayit, Allah Necho melech Mitzrayim lechem bekar kamish al prat vayetze likrato Yoshiyahu. After all of this actually is a fascinating parak in Divrei Hayamim, which tells us that in the 18th year, if you look in the pasuk before, Yoshiyahu actually brought the first korban Pesach in the Beit HaMikdash that had not been brought in a very long time. So after all of this, Yoshiyahu basically felt that the land was secure, and he didn't want any invading armies, even if it was peaceful. We're going to read the Midrash in a moment that I was alluding to. So the description here is Necho is traveling through. Yoshiyahu comes out with his forces. We're not interested in a war. Paro says, I just want to pass through, right? Yoshiyahu says, I'm not getting out of the way. Lo yisev Yoshiyahu pasuk chav bet panav ki lelechem bo. He decides to fight him. Yichapes v'lo shemal divrei Necho mipi Elohim. Okay, God didn't want Yoshiyahu to stop him. I'm going to pause here because the video is running out.